The air hung thick and cloying in the slave pens, a miasma of sweat, despair, and the acrid stench of unwashed bodies. It clung to Runa like a second skin, a suffocating reminder of her captivity, a constant, oppressive weight on her spirit. She huddled in the shadowed corner of her cramped cell, knees drawn tight to her chest, trying to make herself as small as possible, as if she could simply disappear, melt into the darkness and escape the suffocating reality of her existence. Her cerulean skin, once prized for its luminous beauty across the galaxy, was now streaked with grime, a dull, lifeless canvas marred by the relentless cruelty of her enslavement. Her crimson hair, once a glorious cascade of lustrous strands, now hung in a matted tangle, a testament to the neglect and abuse she had endured. Runa, a Kellian, a humanoid alien species renowned across the galaxy for their ethereal grace and striking beauty, qualities that had only served to damn her to this wretched fate. Captured as a mere child, snatched from her idyllic village, she had been thrust into a life of servitude, a brutal, unending cycle of forced labor and unspeakable degradation. For 20 long years, she had endured the whims of cruel masters on a dozen different worlds, each more depraved than the last. She had known the sting of the whip, the bite of hunger, the chilling indifference of those who saw her not as a sentient being, but as a mere possession, a tool to be exploited and discarded at their whim. Now, she found herself on Horde Prime, a remote planet on the fringes of civilized space, sold to Gar the Hurt, a notorious trafficker in flesh and illicit goods, a being whose name alone whispered tales of depravity and cruelty throughout the galaxy. A shudder racked her body, a physical manifestation of the primal fear that coiled within her. What fresh torments awaited her on this desolate, forsaken world? Whispers among the other slaves spoke of Gar's insatiable appetites, his perverse delight in breaking the spirits of even the most defiant, his sadistic pleasure in inflicting pain. The heavy, measured thud of footsteps echoed down the dimly lit corridor, growing steadily closer, a rhythmic percussion that hammered against Runa's already frayed nerves. Her heart pounded against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat of fear and apprehension. A raucous voice, speaking in the harsh, guttural tones of Hera, barked orders, the sound echoing through the squalid confines of the slave pens. The cell door screeched open, revealing a Gamran guard, his pockmarked face a grotesque mask of cruelty, his eyes gleaming with malicious intent. "On your feet, Shuda," he snarled, his voice a grating rasp. "The master demands your presence." Runa rose shakily, the chains that bound her ankles clinking a mournful dirge as she stumbled forward. The guard seized her arm in a bruising grip, his fingers digging into her flesh, and hauled her out into the dank, dimly lit hallway. She blinked rapidly, her eyes struggling to adjust to the oppressive gloom, the flickering torchlight casting long, dancing shadows that seemed to writhe and mock her misery. She was dragged along, passing cell after cell, each a miniature hell crammed with miserable wretches, their faces etched with despair, their eyes hollow and devoid of hope. They refused to meet her gaze, their silence a testament to the crushing weight of their shared suffering. They arrived at an ornate door, intricately carved and emblazoned with Gar's sigil, a grotesque symbol of power and oppression. The Gamran guard pounded a meaty fist against the door, a section of the panel slid open, revealing a pair of bulbous, reptilian eyes peering out. Apparently satisfied, the guardian swung the door wide, ushering them into Gar's opulent audience chamber. A wave of nausea threatened to overwhelm Runa as she entered. The air was thick with an oppressive heat and the cloying, pungent musk of Gar's reptilian slime. The immense chamber was a dizzying array of exotic species, all exquisitely dressed in finery that mocked Runa's ragged clothing, all here to pay court to the mighty Gar, to curry his favor, to bask in the reflected glory of his power. Gar himself dominated the room, his enormous, bloated form sprawled obscenely across a raised dais, his stubby arms draped possessively around two supple Twile consorts, their delicate beauty a stark contrast to Gar's grotesque appearance. "Ah, my sweet new morsel," Gar's booming voice, a guttural rasp that resonated with cruel amusement, cut through the hushed murmurs of the assembled guests. "Come closer. Let me look upon you." The Gamran guard shoved Runa forward, and she stumbled to her knees before the dais, the chains around her ankles clinking a discordant rhythm. She kept her eyes downcast, her body trembling with a potent mixture of fear and revulsion. A pudgy finger, tipped with a sharp, black nail, caught her chin, tilting her face upward. Gar's bulging orange eyes, cold and predatory, roamed hungrily over her features, his tongue flicking out to lick at his drool-slick lips. "Exquisite," he rumbled, his voice thick with predatory satisfaction. "You will make a fine addition to my harem. But first, you must be trained." "Broken. I will take exquisite pleasure in watching the fire fade from your eyes." Runa trembled, but held her tongue, her silence a testament to the quiet strength she had cultivated over years of suffering. Gar chuckled, a wet, guttural sound, and released her chin. He barked an order, and a tall, gaunt Duros with a pinched blue face scurried forward. "Varlo," Gar commanded, his voice dripping with menace, "take our fiery beauty to the pleasure gardens and begin her lessons. I expect her ready for the celebration of the Frenex eclipse." "Yes, my lord," Varlo bowed deeply, his voice a sycophantic whisper. "It will be done." The Duros seized Runa's arm, his grip like iron, and hauled her roughly to her feet. He marched her briskly from the audience chamber, the heavy doors slamming shut behind them with a resounding thud. As they walked, Varlo leaned in close, his breath hot against her ear. "Do not resist, girl," he hissed, his voice a venomous whisper. "It will only make your suffering worse. In the end, you will submit." They all do. A single tear traced a path through the grime on Runa's cheek. Was this to be her fate? To have her spirit systematically crushed, piece by piece, until nothing remained but a hollow shell, a plaything for a bloated monster's lust? As Varlo dragged her into the cloying, perfumed gardens where slaves were trained, Runa sent a silent prayer into the vast, uncaring expanse of space, a desperate plea for deliverance, a whispered hope for escape from this unending nightmare. The Duros chained her to a sturdy post in the center of a secluded grove, his thin, cruel lips curving into a predatory smile. He withdrew a neuronic whip from the folds of his robe, its braided leather gleaming ominously in the dim light. "Now, pretty one," he purred, his voice laced with a sickening sweetness. "Let us begin." The whip uncoiled with a sinister hiss, its tip a menacing point of agonizing pain. Runa squeezed her eyes shut, bracing herself for the inevitable onslaught. But even as white-hot pain lanced through her, searing her flesh and spirit, she clung to a secret ember of defiance, a stubborn spark of resistance buried deep within her heart. She would endure, as she had so many times before. She would never stop hoping for a chance, however improbable, to be free. The stubborn spirit of her people, ground down but never truly extinguished, whispered that somehow, someday, she would once again know the sweet taste of liberty. The Frenex eclipse was the grandest event in 100 parsecs, a dazzling, decadent spectacle of debauchery and excess that marked the celestial alignment of Horde Prime's 7 moons. Gar the Hurt spared no expense in flaunting his wealth and power, transforming his already opulent palace into a phantasmagoria of light, music, and writhing flesh. Runa, adorned in wispy silks and glittering jewels that only served to highlight her exquisite Kellyan beauty, stood on a raised platform, a prized possession, a mere plaything to be displayed and bartered. Varlo, the Duros, had taken sadistic pleasure in her training, breaking her body to his master's will, yet failing to extinguish the fire in her spirit. The scars on her flesh were superficial, easily hidden beneath the opulent finery, but the scars on her soul were raw and deep, wounds that ran far deeper than any physical affliction. The great hall pulsed with a frenetic energy, a chaotic maelstrom of color and sound. It was a dizzying spectacle, a riot of exotic species, each vying for a place in Gar's favor. Elegant moons, draped in shimmering robes, mingled with boisterous besses, their 4 brawny arms gesturing wildly as they quaffed tankards of frothing ale. Sinuous Tron, exuding potent pheromones, moved through the throng, leaving many guests glassy-eyed with desire. And there, at the heart of it all, presided Gar himself, his bloated form jiggling obscenely as he leered at some fawning Scopan guest. Gar was in rare form tonight, his thick lips pulled back in a perpetual leer that revealed rows of yellowed teeth. He surveyed his domain with undisguised satisfaction, a grotesque caricature of power and depravity. Suddenly, a hush fell over the hall, a palpable shift in the atmosphere that cut through the cacophony of the revelry. A new group of visitors had made their entrance, and their arrival was far from unnoticed. Runa craned her neck, curiosity piqued, attempting to see past the throng of glittering guests. The newcomers were unlike anything she'd ever witnessed before. They strode in with a self-assured confidence, a dozen beings clad in strange, shimmering armor that seemed to ripple with an oily sheen. Their faces were completely obscured by featureless black helmets, giving them an aura of unsettling menace, a sense of controlled power that sent a shiver down Runa's spine. Each moved with a coiled grace, a controlled tension that spoke of barely restrained power, a predator poised to strike. But it was their leader who truly commanded attention. He was taller than the rest, his armor a shade darker, shot through with glowing red lines that pulsed in an unsettling rhythm. A heavy cloak billowed behind him as he moved with purposeful strides towards Gar's dais, the crowds parting before him like the waves of an ocean before a mighty ship. Lord Gar, the figure boomed, his voice a harsh, electronic rasp that cut through the stunned silence of the hall. I am Commander Kale of the Black Legion. I come bearing an offer from my master, the great Kareth. Gar shifted his massive bulk to regard the stranger, his small, beady eyes glinting with a mixture of greed and suspicion. You have my attention, Commander. Speak your piece. Kale inclined his head, his movements precise and controlled. Kareth the Unyielding has long admired your business acumen and vast information network. He wishes to engage your services for a matter of some delicacy, a trade of sorts. In exchange for your aid in securing certain artifacts, Kareth is prepared to offer a dozen prime worlds from the Outer Rim, unspoiled paradises, ripe for exploitation. A ripple of excited murmurs ran through the assembled guests. Such an offer was unheard of, a transaction of unimaginable scale and potential profit. Even Gar seemed taken aback, his bulbous head bobbing as he weighed the implications of this unexpected proposition. Gar rumbled, his voice laced with a mixture of calculation and barely concealed greed, but I must have time to deliberate. Enjoy the pleasures of my palace for now, Commander. We shall speak again tomorrow. Kale bowed stiffly, his movements devoid of any unnecessary flourish, and turned on his heel, his black cloak swirling behind him as he moved with purposeful strides through the assembled guests. As he passed Runa's platform, his helmet swiveled momentarily, and Runa felt the weight of his unseen gaze fall upon her. She suppressed a shudder, feeling strangely exposed, vulnerable before that implacable, seemingly emotionless regard. Then, the moment passed, and the commander was gone, swallowed up by the teeming throng. Runa released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding, her skin prickling with unease. Something about these Black Legion mercenaries filled her with a deep sense of foreboding, a primal instinct warning her of hidden dangers. They moved like coiled predators, exuding an aura of barely restrained violence, a palpable sense of controlled menace. Their leader, even without seeing his face, was clearly a being of immense power and ruthless determination, someone who would let nothing stand in the way of his goals. A cold tendril of fear wormed its way into her heart. What dark designs were being set in motion here? What role would she, a lowly slave, play in the intricate machinations of such powerful and ruthless individuals? Runa had no answers, only a growing certainty that her fate, for better or for worse, was inextricably bound to these mysterious warriors from the void. The fragile ember of hope that flickered within her heart wavered before the looming shadow of the unknown, but she would not let it be extinguished. Whatever trials lay ahead, Runa silently vowed to meet them with the same quiet strength that had sustained her through the long, agonizing years of her captivity. Even a slave could dream of freedom, and sometimes, just sometimes, dreams came true. The Franex Eclipse Ball was in full swing, the great hall a swirling kaleidoscope of drunken revelry and unrestrained debauchery. Runa paid the chaos little heed, lost in thought as she often was these days. Her mind kept circling back to the Black Legion and their inscrutable leader. Whispers abounded of the Legion's fearsome reputation, tales of merciless warriors who struck from the shadows, meting out their own brand of brutal, swift justice. Some dismissed them as myth, a boogeyman invented to strike fear into the hearts of the wicked. Others swore they were all too real, an elite cadre of killers who left only a trail of carnage in their wake. Suddenly, a piercing scream, sharp and shrill, cut through the din of the revelry. Runa's head snapped up, her eyes widening in alarm. Across the hall, a palpable wave of panic rippled through the crowds. Beings shoved and clawed at each other in a desperate, chaotic scramble to escape some unseen threat. And then she saw them, dark figures pouring into the hall from every entrance, weapons drawn, their movements precise and efficient. They moved with a ruthless precision, a terrifying efficiency that spoke of years of brutal training and countless battles fought and won. Stun bolts and tranquilizer darts flew, dropping their targets in heaps, their movements a lethal ballet of controlled violence. Through the chaos, strode a single figure, tall, commanding, clad in his black armor. In one hand, he wielded a stun baton, its crackling energy casting eerie shadows across his impassive faceplate. With a single, fluid gesture, he sent a trio of guards tumbling, their weapons clattering uselessly to the floor. The figure's head swiveled, his helmet scanning the hall with a cold, impersonal gaze. Runa felt her heart race as that implacable gaze fell upon her. Time seemed to slow as he raised a hand, pointing directly at her. Runa couldn't breathe, couldn't think. She was frozen, transfixed by the aura of power and purpose that radiated from him. And then, just as suddenly, he turned away. The figure barked a sharp order, and a squad of his warriors peeled off, charging towards the dais where Gar cowered behind a makeshift shield of terrified slaves and fawning sycophants. Gar's eyes were wide with terror, his bloated form trembling uncontrollably. He gabbled a stream of pleas and desperate promises, but the Legion paid him no heed. They vaulted onto the dais, restraining bolts and stunned cuffs at the ready, moving with a chillingly efficient brutality. Runa tore her gaze away, hardly daring to hope. Could this really be happening? Were these mysterious warriors truly here to end Gar's vile reign of terror? A new sound rose above the tumult, a deep, rhythmic thudding that shook the very foundations of the palace. Runa looked up, a gasp escaping her lips. Descending from the night sky was a squadron of sleek, predatory ships, settling onto the palace grounds with pinpoint precision. Dozens more black-clad figures emerged from the ships, moving with a terrifying grace and efficiency, securing the perimeter, their movements a symphony of controlled violence. Runa watched, scarcely breathing, as a new figure emerged from the lead ship. He was human, that much was immediately clear, tall and broad-shouldered, moving with the self-assured grace of a natural leader. As he approached, Runa saw his face, chiseled and handsome beneath his close-cropped silver hair. His eyes were the color of a stormy sea, intense and piercing. The human surveyed the scene with a grim satisfaction, his expression one of controlled power. Then, his gaze fell upon Runa, and she felt a jolt run through her as if she'd been struck by lightning. There was something in those eyes, a flicker of compassion, of understanding. It was gone in an instant, replaced by a mask of cool professionalism, but Runa knew she hadn't imagined it. The human turned to the warrior at his side, the one who had first pointed Runa out. They exchanged a few terse words, then the warrior nodded and moved off, issuing commands into his calm link. Runa watched, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs, as the squad leader approached her platform. He moved with purpose, his every step sure and measured. She felt the weight of his gaze on her, assessing, appraising. He halted before her, reaching up to remove his helmet. There was a hiss of releasing pressure, and then Runa's breath caught in her throat. He was stunning, chiseled features, strong jaw, eyes the color of a stormy sea. His hair was short, close-cropped, a shade of deep, rich brown that seemed to absorb the light. But it was his smile that truly captivated her, warm, genuine, utterly breathtaking. In that moment, Runa felt something stir within her, a tectonic realignment of her very soul. She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw not just her rescuer, but her destiny. "I'm Sergeant Kade Decker, Terran Special Forces," he said, his voice a rich baritone that seemed to resonate in her very bones. "What's your name?" "Runa," she managed, cursing the breathless quaver in her voice. Kade's smile widened, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Runa," he repeated, a note of wonder in his tone. "A beautiful name for a beautiful woman." Those words, spoken with such sincerity and warmth, struck Runa like a physical blow. She felt her cheeks flush, her heart stutter in her chest. No one had ever called her beautiful before, not with such genuine admiration and respect. In that moment, something shifted inside her, a profound realignment of her very being. She looked at Kade, really looked at him, and saw not just her rescuer, but her destiny. He reached out gently, removing her shackles with a deft twist of his hands. His fingers brushed her skin, sending a jolt of electricity coursing through her. Runa stared at him, hardly daring to believe. You're here to rescue me?" Kade smiled, a small quirk of his lips. "We're here to rescue everyone. You're free now. Gar's reign of terror is over." Tears sprang to Runa's eyes, a lifetime of pent-up emotion threatening to overwhelm her. She looked around, taking in the sight of Gar and his cronies being led away in restraints, the former slaves weeping and embracing each other in joyous disbelief. It was real. It was happening. After so many years of darkness, a glimmer of light had finally pierced the veil. Runa turned back to Kade, a watery smile on her face. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for saving us." Kade inclined his head, something warm and achingly human in his eyes. "It's what we do," he said softly. "No one deserves to live in chains." He held out a hand, an invitation and a promise. "Come on, let's get you out of here. There's a whole galaxy waiting for you." Runa placed her hand in his, marveling at the way they fit together, like two pieces of a cosmic puzzle. She let him lead her away from the platform, away from the pain and degradation of her old life, towards freedom, towards joy, towards a love that would shake the very stars from their courses. Together, they walked towards the waiting ships, into a bright, boundless future. The journey from Horde Prime was a blur of activity and emotion. The Terran ships were a hive of controlled chaos, medics tending to the wounded, officers debriefing the freed slaves, technicians repairing gear and restocking supplies. Through it all, Runa remained at Kade's side, marveling at the easy efficiency of the Terran Special Forces. These were no ordinary soldiers, but a tight-knit brotherhood, forged in the crucible of countless battles, moving and acting as one, a well-oiled machine dedicated to a singular purpose, protecting the innocent and righting the wrongs of the galaxy. In the quiet moments between the bustle, Kade never left her side. He was a constant presence, strong, reassuring, always ready with a kind word or a gentle touch. With every passing hour, Runa felt herself falling deeper and deeper in love. It was more than just physical attraction, though there was no denying the electric thrill that coursed through her every time their eyes met. This was a meeting of souls, a profound connection that transcended mere flesh and bone. In Kade, Runa saw a kindred spirit, someone who had known pain and loss but had emerged from the darkness stronger and more compassionate. He was a beacon of hope in a galaxy that had long since lost its way, a shining example of the best humanity had to offer. As the days turned into weeks, Runa began to heal, both physically and emotionally, under the tender care of the Terran medics. Her scars faded, her body grew strong and healthy, but it was Kade's love that truly mended her shattered soul. He was endlessly patient, never pushing, never demanding. He was content simply to be near her, to offer his strength and unwavering support as she grappled with the demons of her past. Slowly but surely, Runa began to open up, to share the horrors she had endured, the dreams she had long since abandoned. And Kade listened, his eyes filled with a profound empathy that took her breath away. He understood her in a way no one else ever had, saw past the scars and the trauma to the fierce, unbreakable spirit within. Under his tender guidance, Runa began to blossom, to rediscover the joy and wonder that had been stolen from her so long ago. She laughed more freely, smiled more readily, her eyes sparkling with a newfound zest for life. And through it all, their love grew, a precious, fragile thing that they nurtured and cherished. It was a love born of shared pain and shared triumph, tempered in the fires of adversity and forged into something unbreakable. When at last the Terran ships reached the shining heart of the Galactic Alliance, Runa knew she was home, not just in a physical sense, but in the deepest recesses of her heart. She stood hand in hand with Kade on the observation deck, gazing out at the jeweled splendor of the capital world. Tears of joy streamed down her face as she turned to the man who had become her everything. "I love you," she whispered, the words a sacred vow, a heartfelt confession. "I love you with every fiber of my being, every beat of my heart. You saved me, Kade, in every way a person can be saved." Kade smiled, his eyes shining with an answering devotion. "And I love you, Runa, more than life itself. You are my heart, my soul, my reason for being. Without you, I am incomplete." He dropped to one knee, his gaze never leaving hers. From his pocket, he withdrew a simple band of gold, gleaming in the starlight. "Runa, my love, my life, will you marry me? Will you stand by my side, now and forever, as we face the challenges of this life together?" Runa's heart soared, a joy beyond words filling her to the brim. "Yes," she managed through her tears. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes." Kade slipped the ring onto her finger, then surged to his feet, capturing her lips in a kiss that seared her to her very soul. Around them, the Terran soldiers erupted into cheers and applause, their voices raised in a joyous celebration of love's triumph. And as Runa lost herself in Kade's embrace, she knew that this was only the beginning. Together, they would heal the hurts of the past, would face the trials of the future with courage and compassion. Together, they would build a life, a family, a legacy, a shining beacon of hope and love in a galaxy that had long yearned for such light. And though the road ahead would be long and hard, Runa knew they would walk it hand in hand, their love a shield against all darkness, for they were one now, and forever. A love to shake the stars from their courses. A love to light the very heavens.